All right. Hi, I'm Melitza Hinnick back with you today talking about academic podcast entanglements. Today, I'm here with Roxana Escobar, a PhD candidate from the Department of Geography and Planning at the University of Toronto. Her research focuses on Afro-Peruvian women performers of Criollo music and the relationships within the city of Lima. Please tell us more about yourself and the research you're currently working on.
Hi, thank you for having me here. Thank you for doing this work. I do feel like thinking about academic podcasting is a good entryway for public scholarship. And I am a strong believer that public scholarship, particularly nowadays, needs to be present and constantly and accessible to everyone. And yes, well, you mentioned I'm Roxana Escobar. I'm doing a PhD in the Department of Geography and Planning at U of T. I'm originally from Peru, born and raised. I came to Canada in 2015 to do a master's, and I just stayed. And now I'm trying to finish this PhD very soon.
Amazing. That's exciting. Today's theme is focused on reimagining space. This connects with your conversation on El Cafecito?
Cafecito.
Cafecito.
Like cafe, but like the diminutive cafecito.
Cafecito. Okay. I recently listened to this podcast episode, and in it you discussed the Criollo music and the Criollo culture in Lima, Peru. You shared others' perspectives and your personal lived experiences, the human geography. Through listening, I became aware of how important sonic environments are and how they can be experienced through multiple scales. So spaces where each lived experience had its own celebrations and tensions. Can you share more about the importance of sonic environments for the Criollo culture and how you see it changing?
Yeah, for sure. So my dissertation thesis is about the ways in which Afro-Peruvian women participate in the urban life and urban memory of the city of Lima. And one way in which they have participated in the landscapes of the city since colonial times until now is through music and performance. So I am not doing an historical research. I'm not going to the colonial times, although I can assure you they were present there. I am doing mostly contemporary analysis from the 1990s until now of how Black women continuously participate in Lima's urban life. And music has been a tool to what I call spatializing Blackness. It's a way in which Blackness has remained part of the fabric and the infrastructure of the city. And it's a way in which the city of Lima has come to have its own identity. Like it wouldn't be Lima without the constant participation of Afro-Peruvian people in the city. And what I'm trying to see is like that sector in which the participation of women is actually, I won't say more important than the participation of men, because that's not true, but it's admiring. It's something that because it's so normal in urban life in Lima, no one really is paying attention to how special it is and to how transformative it is. So in a nutshell, I study how these women spatialize Blackness through their bodies, through their voices, through their performances. They are present in every major holiday in the city of Lima and all around the country too. They travel a lot. They work from Wednesday to Sunday. Sometimes, like 2, 3 shifts on the weekends. They are present when it's your mom's birthday because you hire them to go and sing Criollo music. For Mother's Day, for Independence Day, we have our own day for Criollo music in Lima, which is October 31st. So, for example, when Halloween came to be a thing in the South, now it's kind of mixed with Criollo Day because like people dress as Criollo performers. or,
Oh,
or we include both of the celebrations together. Like you go to a venue in which like a Criollo party is being held, and you will see Halloween themes as well. You know, like Criollo culture is so present, so important for the city of Lima. It's like opening it up to maybe other celebrations, but never really going away.
mm-hmm.
And I do believe that Black women play a key role in which how the culture has developed, is sustaining itself, and how it will be present in the future.
Yeah, I feel like it produces that emotional response. The feelings when you respond to the music, you're immersed in the culture and you're exposed to it that often. You might be oblivious to it, but it is a thing that you should stop and pay attention to and really feel that emotional context and that emphasis of life. Those friendships being created, the struggles or like the anger, the rawness of everything, right? It captures the human.
I mean, music is a geographical tool, right? Like music, it allows you to see the space in which you are, and the combination of sounds are only possible because you are in a particular geographical location with particular humans that are bringing their own emotions, as you mentioned, but also their interaction with the space. Like it wouldn't happen without interaction with the space. In order to do music, you need the space and time, which is life itself. It's so important for me to see how these performances, like the Afro-Peruvian women's performances and the venues that they own, in which these performances are being reproduced constantly, are a way in which they are creating place constantly. They are giving space meaning. They are providing an avenue to understand how place is created. You can see it from, okay, I'm going to this venue and like having a good time and listening to a couple of songs. But for example, I studied two sisters that they have their own Criollo venue for 50 years and non-stop. They only stopped for the pandemic for like 2 years. But they have resisted everything in the country. They have resisted terrorism. They have resisted military dictatorships. They have resisted authoritarianism. They have resisted poverty. They have resisted everything. And there is a value for what that space is holding on. And there is a value why these women, one of them is 81, the other one is 79.
Wow.
They are still doing it into this day. And you know, like they are Afro-mestizas, they are like Black mixed with other ethnicities of Lima. But there's something about their Blackness that keep it going. For me, music, I see it as a way in which it constantly collaborates with the creation of meaning. And the creation of meaning is very much related to how we live in space. And that's why what I do is called performance geographies. It's a way of understanding Black geographies through performance. And I feel that in the city of Lima, as I mentioned before, doing it through the eyes of these women and their labor, it opens up a conversation regarding who are they? Why do we have so many Black women performing as Criollo singers? Like there's a reason, there is historical and socioeconomical reasons. There are not that many avenues for Black women to be part of the economic force in other settings, but there is this huge stereotype that Black women in Lima particularly are good cooking, dancing, and singing. To what I say, like, but they must be extraordinary because in a place in which, you know, like Blackness is not really welcome, then you have all these women who are so important for the city that the city will disappear without them. So even though they were boxed in particular spaces of the city, they found freedom in it. And freedom is a place, as Ruthie Gilmore say, they found ways of being in the world. And that experience is the experience that I want to portray with my thesis. So it's about the performance, but it's about the place in which the performance is held and why is it held. And this is a Black tradition that doesn't only belong to Latin America. I mean, it's also very present in the Caribbean with dancehall. It's also very present in the different ghettos in the US with rap and hip hop. It's present in South Africa with Kuwaito as well. It's a way in which Blackness is present. And I feel that's a conversation that we need to keep having.
Yes, thank you. It is very important. And it's a way of preserving the culture and sharing voice and agency. Like you said, it's a way of expressing themselves, freeing their emotions in a sense and their struggles in life. They found space, found their place of belonging.
And a place to shine.
Yes. Yeah, for sure. In terms of podcasting, where do you see academic podcasting falling into your dissertation?
I mean, I have done a podcast based on my dissertation findings. I did the podcast for three main reasons. First, to highlight the lives of these women and to bring the storytelling that is very much present in Afro-Peruvian culture to bring it to the digital space. And that's why my podcast is called Tertulia Day. Tertulia was a type of gathering that was very present during colonial times, and like people were, particularly, like men were getting together to think about freedom and to start, like thinking about the revolution and liberation that, like led to the Peruvian independence in 1821. But Tertulia was also happening in the domestic spaces. And in these spaces in which women were very much present and sometimes at the center of. So now when you think like in contemporary times, when you think of Tertulia, it has translated to a gathering in which we share, we laugh, we cry, we sing, we play an instrument, we eat, particularly we eat and we eat a lot. And it's something that just happens, it's not really planned. Sometimes it happens, like when the party is over and most of the people are left and just like that group of friends stay. It's a storytelling practice in which knowledge is being produced, in which memories are being activated, in which stories, even compositions, songs that no one has ever heard, are being shared in Criollo spaces because that's what it's supposed to do. So I created Tertulia Day as a way of like bringing that type of environment into the digital spaces by highlighting the ways in which Afro-Peruvian women produce knowledge and share knowledge and are themselves, like the source in which knowledge is being produced, like their lives, their bodies, their experiences, their voices. So I created Tertulia Day to, as I mentioned, highlight these women. And second, as a way of giving back to my participants, because as an Afro-Peruvian person myself, like I know that Afro-Peruvian women particularly don't have that many spaces for exposure and for understanding. There's a lot of extractivism regarding academia with Black lives, as it happens everywhere. And I'm writing a thesis in English. I live in Canada, and I needed to do something for them to see the fruit of their labor and their experiences in a very shining way. I always want them to shine. I always heard from all of my participants that, sometimes I ask, what does it mean to be Black in Lima? And they are always telling me, I'm proud to be Black. So I tried to create a space in which that pride could be highlighted. And through the conversation, through their voices, the interviews that I do in the podcast are very light, are like our tertulia are just a way of sharing, a way of like getting to know each other a little bit more. There are many jokes, there are many storytelling, there is like a lot of, like memories of like, this happened when I was 18, and then this was my mentor, and then this is how you started my career. So I wanted to do Tertulia Day as a way of showing them what my thesis is all about, but also showing them to other audiences. Now, Tertulia Day will be launched in June 22nd in the Ministry of Culture of Peru, who are my partners. So I'm going back to Lima to make the official launch. And that podcast is going to be in English and Spanish. And now everyone can hear these women in YouTube, in Spotify, in Apple Tunes. And like that was part of the reason why I wanted to do it, because when I mentioned them, like, your name is gonna be in an English interview, they shine. They were like, oh, so like more people are gonna know about me, which like translate in direct livelihood. Actually, it can translate in direct livelihood. Like all of my interviews, I finish the interview saying like, hire this woman, look her up, look her social media, she's available.
Yeah.
And I wish that happens, like in Peru and outside of Peru. And the third reason why I created Tertulia Day was because I felt a responsibility of reflecting on the ways in which Lima has been transformed through Blackness. And I think by seeing these women and they telling me, like how they grew up, where they grew up, like the intrinsic ways in which their neighborhood, their hood, their house is so much related to who they are, to their Blackness, to the way in which they perform and learn music. I think that was also like a big reason for me to see how my thesis was developing. And to highlight an argument about the importance of Blackness in urban culture.
That's amazing. That is perfect. What a great idea. Honestly, it puts them center working with you as a co-producer, even like pre-production. They're working with the script, they're working with you, explaining their or sharing their lived experience, their story. And it's being amplified for everyone to hear. Like you said, shine. And in the long run, it's being preserved for others to hear generations later. Another space.
Yes, to create a space for the future, to create a space for the present. Like many of feedback that I have received from my participants, because I interview them for the thesis first, and then I re-interview them for the podcast in a different way, in a non-academic way, in a more, light conversation.
Yeah.
And most of them kept telling me that they want recognition now. Like they don't want to be a space in a book for the future.
Yes.
And completely fair, that's what they should be receiving, like right now. So Tertulia came to be like grounding that idea in mind. It's like, okay, the recognition now, how does it look like? Representation matters, I know.
Yeah.
And I will always, like work towards that. But for me, recognition now, particularly when you have a cohort of women participating so actively in the building of a city, we need to do more. We need to do much more. And we have, like extremely well-known Afro-Peruvian singers, Afro-Peruvian women singers of Criollo music and not Criollo music. Like they're actually our most international performers. But then you have this cohort of women that are very local. They've been singing and doing this performance for more than 40 years, some of them. Part of my methodology for my thesis and for the podcast is how do we study these women, like Black women from the South and their spatial practices. And I think through conversation, through Tertulia, is a way in which we can understand that. And at the same time, we're giving recognition, we're highlighting them, we're also reflecting on the places they have in the city of Lima. So for me, academic podcasting has allowed me to do all of that. Like when you listen to the content of the podcast, it is not academic at all. is recreating Tertulia, which was the goal of the podcast.
Mhm.
But you can see the intention of, like trying to reflect on the Black geographies of Lima. My brother, Alonso Escobar, he was my producer. And I do remember like writing the scripts with him, but during the tape of the conversation, he sometimes had to stop me and say like, can you please say neighborhood instead of spatial urban geographies?
So
Like,
technical.
yeah. He was grounding me constantly, in which
Yeah.
like it has to be entertaining. It can be interesting without not using these very fancy words.
Yes.
It also, it's not about you, it's about them. I wouldn't have been able to develop this podcast if it wasn't from my academic background. So I feel that academic podcasting, now we have many avenues to reproduce them. We have the ones in which we discuss directly academic content and academic interviews, which is fine. And I think we also have these other ones, as I hope mine will fit into, of like just knowledge production and knowledge reproduction.
Yeah, and you're right. The way I see your work is it's like a community project as well at the same time. It's community-based research. You're immersed in a community and you are practicing with them and you are working together. I'm using a fancy word, reciprocity, like back and forth. Back and forth. You're having a conversation, right? A dialogue. It's important. It captures critical podcast methodology. You're doing reflexivity, your voices, those counter narratives. You're challenging hierarchies. You're opening up the space for everyone to join. As a Latinx woman, how do you see this impact your decision-making process in teaching and research? You mentioned some challenges, how you were trying to change your terminology, make it simpler, which I still have trouble with going both ways. I feel like sometimes I'm trying to process things in different spaces. So how do you work with that?
I mean, I prep a lot. I think that was key. I knew this was new for me. I knew, I never been a host of anything in my life. I mean, I do consider myself a public scholar, but public scholarship is about me. Like it's me talking, it's me preparing a script, it's me facing difficult questions or like translating information for the public, which I've been doing for so many years. But this is another kind of public scholarship in which it's not about me anymore, but it is. So it is in the ways in which you manufacture it. So I prep a lot. I first acknowledge the things that I didn't know and the strengths that I needed to develop. I study, I work, as I mentioned, with my producer and also my developer, who like had like an amazing studio, who gave us the space to play around, who gave us the space to teach us, like this looks better, this sounds better, the light needs to be this way. So he was also like a teacher in a sense. I research a lot. Like I already interviewed these women, but I researched more. I saw all of their YouTube participations. I tried to find them in the archives. I re-listened my interviews many times to have particular facts that I knew were going to be able to develop a wider and more interesting conversation for them and also for the public, not for me and for my thesis.
Yes.
For the intention that the podcast needed to have. So that was very challenging. I have no training in communication, so facing a camera, like we recorded 12 episodes.
Oh, wow.
10 weeks. So it was a lot. It was a lot of production. And I never directed anything either. So that was my first time directing, creative stuff. Which was also a big challenge, but I had to learn in the way. So I prep and I prep and I practice. And my mom and my father, they practice with me the interviews, they practice the questions, they practice, my tone, how to flex my voice. It was a lot of preparation, and like I do feel, as I mentioned before, a huge responsibility as an Afro-Peruvian person myself, because there's a methodology for feminist geographies in which like you can be an insider outsider when you do research. Like you can get in touch with your participants, but you come from a different background. I was an insider at home. And that proposes different ways in which you access to bias, to information, to conversations, to friendships. I had previous relationship with some of the singers, so I needed to navigate that too in order for the thesis to have the rigorosity that it needs to have, but also in order for me to be a complete human being in front of my participants and not being this robot who's like asking questions and accessing their life. So I prep a lot. I felt the responsibility of, if I'm gonna talk about these women who are my community, like my ancestors have also been Criollo singers and Criollo performers. So I'm very well immersed into the culture. But I'm talking to the north and talking to the south. So finding a way in which this content can be communicated to different audiences, I think that is my biggest responsibility until now that I'm writing the thesis. But ultimately, my responsibility is with my community and my participants. So they are always at the center. Well, I'm not in my office right now, but if you were in my office, you will see that I have many pictures of them and parties and venues, because they are the ones guiding me through this journey. But yeah, it was difficult.
Yeah, no, it sounds like you have a lot of support and you're very motivated and re-evaluating your work. Like, so you keep going back and you're like, oh, I can do this better. You ask if you need help with something. Yeah, it sounds like you're doing an amazing job helping the community. I can't wait to listen to the podcast.
Coming soon.
Learn more. What is your favorite? Do you have a favorite Afro-Peruvian artist?
No, I can't say that. No, all of them are my favorite. I have stronger friendships with some of them.
Yeah.
Like Señora Marina Reto, she became my friend. The Lopez sisters, like I based a whole chapter of my dissertation only, and then they became very close friends with me, with my whole family. Yeah, like Nancy Izquierdo, I actually do say in my the short that I have, like we prepare shorts for the YouTube videos of the episodes.
Oh, okay.
So we have, I mean, this is also like a critical methodology that I try to apply. And like I look and I think I am one of the first doing this, because the interview is in Spanish, but we are putting subtitles in English. So, like doesn't speak Spanish and speak or read English can access to it. We also did shorts presenting the YouTube videos in English, so we can take the audio out of the videos and also upload the English little short versions of every episode into the other platforms, because like the interviews in either Spotify or whatever other platform that we use is going to be completely in Spanish. So we needed to have something in English to at least bring the person that is listening to this little short to go to the episode on YouTube. So we were like, like creating. I was creating. I came with this idea while I was, like agonizing about how to make this accessible. And, like the institution that is giving me the money is a Canadian institution. So French was also like moving around. It's like, no, I can't do a trilingual podcast. That's so difficult.
Did you hear about the AI Spotify podcaster?
I know, but the translation wasn't good. Like we listen to every episode, we transcribe, we translate, like humans beings behind it. We did it.
Yeah.
But like in order to find a way in which I was stuck because the audio was going to be completely in Spanish. But then we were going to have subtitles in English in YouTube. So I was like, okay, so maybe we can have little audios in English also in the sound platforms. So people can go to the YouTube. So like all of that made me realize, coming back to your question, that one of my favorite people in the world, her name is Nancy Izquierdo. She's a fabulous singer. She started as a dancer and as a cook, but she's bringing back a genre of Criollo music that has been kind of hidden for like 100 years. And she's bringing back, like the sounds of Marinera Limeña, which is like are amazing and are literally archives of the city of Lima. Like in the lyrics, you will find descriptions of neighborhoods, description of Black women selling food on the streets in Republican times, like in 1824, 1825. So Catherine McKintrey, which is like my favorite geographer, she says that in order to study Black geography, we need to go interdisciplinary because we're not going to find us in the archives. So we have to go to lyrics, we have to go to storytelling, we have to go to little spaces on the street with a particular name that brings your curiosity and then entangle it to a Black way of creating a space. And Nancy is doing exactly that. In a performance that she had, that I went to see her, she was wearing a red dress with white dots, and like her hair was very beautiful in a ponytail, and she had a flower, and she had like very high white heels. And that same day I found a picture of a woman looking exactly like her, wearing exactly the same outfit in 1942 in a newspaper.
Wow.
So I was like, Nancy, like, did you inspire yourself in these women? She was like, I never seen this in my life. And that's why my thesis is so magical, right? Because it truly is the history of the present. And seeing it live, and then, like discovering in these other archival ways of knowing and researching. So she became my favorite in that moment.
Thank you for sharing that. That's so nice. I just love culture. I just like learning about new culture. It's like I want to go to Peru, Lima right now. I just want to go see the Criollo culture. Yeah, honestly, it sounds so beautiful. So, what are your hopes for academic podcast communities? What do you think? Do you think that more scholars will be doing their research this way or teaching this way through podcasting, like as a method or as like a tool for disseminating their research? What do you think?
I think, yeah, we should keep on going. I mean, if it is a trend now, like I'm hoping for it to stay, right? But if it's a trend now, it's a beautiful trend. Like it's something that we should be doing. I feel that my students have responded very well to podcasts when I have used them in class. I, as a student, had responded very well to it too. I feel that academic podcasting do have a responsibility regarding how we reproduce knowledge and how we don't reproduce white supremacy and hierarchies. Like if you want to do a community-based podcast as I did, there's a responsibility to do it in a non-extractive way and with methodologies that are in the service of the community. But if you want to do, like a podcast based on understanding Marx capital, which is totally valuable too and totally fine, there is also a responsibility of doing it first accessible so we can all learn and not just like a niche group of people can learn. And second, this is, I think, what I understand the most. You need to prep a lot. That I think preparation is the way in which we show responsibility to our listeners and to our students, and we need to prep a lot.
Thank you. Yeah, for sure. And do you see any differences between the Western academic realm of podcasting versus the global South, listening or just interacting with your community? How do they take that as podcasting? They're like, are they afraid? Are they like, should we do the interview? We are, you know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah. No, it was a learning curve for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, Most of my participants are 70 plus, so they didn't even know what a podcast was. So just like, like the responsibility starts there, communicating clearly what is that you're doing. I took the responsibility of providing all of the meanings for them to be present in the podcast. So sending a cab or picking them myself, explaining in the way to the studio what was happening, call them before time to explain what the interview is going to be about. They can veto whatever they want to veto during the conversation, like having your ethics very clear.
Mm-hmm.
That was a huge important part of, like how you produce the Colonial Academy. And I think in doing so, I do feel that many, like Western North American podcasts are doing the same. Like we're coming back from a similar background in social justice. What I do feel different is that I do, maybe because it's my culture in my language, I do feel that particularly Latin American podcastings are more fun. I enjoy them more.
Yeah.
And I think it's because I pick up on the cultural clues,
Mm-hmm.
right? Sometimes, yeah, North American podcasting, they don't give me that because I just don't know.
Mm-hmm.
There's like, I don't know, even the joyful production of the dialogue, it feels there's something different for me there, which I mostly listen to Latin American podcasts. I have a couple of English podcasts that I like, but I don't listen to many of those. Yeah.
Yeah. You like the vibe. You like the Latin America vibe. I'm not gonna lie either. I love the music. I just feel happy. Again, the emotion, the effect, you feel that from their voices, from the music. You feel that happiness or the sadness or whatever it may be.
You
But
feel the
you
emotions.
feel the emotions. Yeah.
I mean, as I mentioned to you before, I don't really listen to academic podcasts. The ones that are, like discussing a book or discussing any other academic issue. I do listen to the podcasts that are public scholarship in the sense of like academics who are doing these conversational podcasts that are much more inclusive, like academia is still there,
Mm-hmm.
not being reproduced in a typical academic way, which, like for that we have the classroom. But like the other ones are also okay because for people who cannot access to classrooms, they can receive that information and that's perfectly okay. I'm happy that. But academia is my life. This is what I do every day. Like I teach every day. I write my thesis every day. I am doing conferences all the time. So I don't want my podcast to be about that or
Yeah.
my podcasting habits to be about that. I need something else. And thankfully, like podcasting has grown so big that you can find different genres. Yeah. I was in a academic podcasting school recently and it's called the Amplify Network. It's at Simon Fraser University. Hannah McGregor is the director. And I listened to a podcast for the first time that, no, they made us create a podcast. They gave us a subject. Mine was romance.
Oh.
And they made us create a podcast like just 1 minute of whatever. With my group, we made like a dinosaur bumble episode in which the whole podcast was like roaring, like wow. And at the end of, like that whole minute, like with all the intentions that sounds allows you to do and like music as well.
Mhm.
At the end, like people from the school were like, you need to do this podcast. I will listen to it. I was like, yeah. That freedom communicating, I don't think is something that we need to preserve.
Mhm. I agree. And we got to have fun while we're doing it too, right? That's my challenge. I feel like, okay, I'm making a script. I need to follow the script. I'm all nervous. I'm like, oh my God, did I miss the question? You know what? Sometimes you just let it free flow, let the conversation go, improvise, and it's more meaningful that way.
Sometimes. I do love my script. I wouldn't be here without a good script.
Going back to my script, my final thoughts. What is the biggest takeaway you hope listeners to learn?
From this episode,
Yes.
um, I think you need to learn more about the Criollo music scene in Lima. I think thanks to your podcast, like critical podcasting is the subject, so I think they can all grab a little bit of that from every episode. But the content itself of like reflecting, highlighting, and acknowledging Black cultures in the South is something that we need to do more often. And I hope, like you feel inspired with this conversation and you go and find many singers like Abya Yala, like Susana Vaca, like Araceli Poma, Nancy Izquierdo, and many, many others, Leticia Curay. They are all on YouTube. So you can, like even if you don't understand the lyric, like acknowledge the beauty of the performance and the music.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I was going to ask you your favorite podcast you listen to. Do you have one?
I have many. Okay, so I'm gonna give you my top 5 because I cannot choose. The first one is called Radio Ambulante, which is like the Latinx version of This American Life, kind of.
Okay, yeah.
Very much based on stories from Latin America. And they are huge. They even have a side podcast that's called El Hilo, which is the trend. It's like a news podcast. So that's amazing. They also have another side podcast it's called Luna, I believe, in which like they teach you Spanish using the podcast episodes.
Oh, fantastic.
Like talking about pedagogical tools.
Yes.
This is something I think we should be doing more and more. Like storytelling should be a tool to, like get into other cultures. So the other podcast that I love is Afro-Mexican one that is called Afro Chingonas, which is like a Black feminist podcast from Mexico. And it's great because, like they talk about all the things that I'm interested about. So it's awesome. And lately, I've been listening to this. It's called Getting Curious by Jonathan Van Ness, which is one of the Queer Eye guys, the new cohort. And I like the podcast because like they interview people from different walks of life, like scientists and like people who are experts on wigs, etc., etc. And it's coming from a real curiosity place. And it's so cool and it's so well produced and the questions are so on point. So, like it's the one that I listen when I walk my dog. And it's awesome. Yeah.
Awesome. I'll try to check that one out.
Yeah.
Sounds cool. Thank you so much for taking the time out of your day discussing podcasting with us.
Thank you. And I hope everything goes great with your podcast.
Thank you. It was a pleasure reimagining space with Roxana Escobar. Her research in Lima, Peru gives back to the Criollo community. She shares Afro-Peruvian culture using podcasts to co-produce, co-create knowledge through the performances, through the Criollo music. With a major focus on dialogue, she applies reflexivity, oral history, and human geography. It transforms knowledge sharing onto a new space, the digital space. This digital space gives back to the Criollo woman, the music, the artists, and the culture. An alternative means of performance and ways of being in the world. A space of freedom. Check out the show notes below for Roxana's Spotify Criollo playlist and links to the research she is working on. Tune in to our next episode with McMaster PhD candidate Faye Damey's collaborative research project, Pedagogies of Hope. Ciao for now.